The drone died the second it crossed the debris field. No warning, no error code. One moment the feed was live, the next static, just like the 4 drones before it. Stared at the dead screen for a long moment, then slowly looked up through the scratched viewport of his salvaged ship, the Meridian's Luck, at what the Galactic Survey Commission had filed under a name as boring as they could make it. Anomaly 7 Kappa. It was supposed to be a dead moon, unremarkable, surveyed twice, flagged twice as empty, ignored ever since. Except moons didn't have right angles. Even from 2 kilometers out, the shape was undeniable. Something had slammed into the lunar surface at an angle and partially buried itself, the rock growing over it across centuries like flesh closing over a splinter. Most of the wreck was consumed, but the stern still jutted from the crust, scorched black, 200 meters of it jutting into the vacuum like a gravestone nobody had thought to read. Zoomed his optics to maximum. The hull plating made his stomach drop. He knew that pattern. He'd seen it in textbooks, in museum displays, on the framed print that had hung above his grandfather's fireplace his entire childhood. He zoomed further, found the designation stenciled along the flank, faded by 3 centuries of cosmic radiation to barely a whisper of white paint, and read it letter by letter as his hands went cold. UES Ardent Blade, REG, No. 17 Earth First Fleet. He sat back. The Ardent Blade, the most famous ship in human history, not for what it did, but for what happened to it. The flagship of humanity's first expansion fleet, lost with 4,000 souls at the Battle of Reach 340 years ago. Declared destroyed by the Galactic Council in a memorial ceremony that had been broadcast to every human world. The grief of an entire species, given a date and a monument and a moment of silence, and then filed away. There was a 10 million credit bounty on its location. That was more money than would earn in 4 lifetimes. More than enough to clear every debt he had, buy a new ship, retire somewhere warm, and never think about salvage again. He should have called it in. He should have pinged the council relay and sat back and waited for the reward ships to arrive. Instead, he checked his EVA suit seals, grabbed a cutting torch and a crowbar, and began maneuvering the Meridian's Luck toward the exposed airlock. Later, when people asked him why he went in alone, why he didn't call for backup, why he risked his life boarding a derelict warship on a dead moon with no one knowing where he was, would never have a clean answer. The truth was simple and a little embarrassing. He just couldn't help himself. Some people were born curious, was born dangerously curious. The airlock was cold and jammed. It took him 20 minutes of brute force work with the crowbar to crack the seal, and when he did, the sound that came from inside the ship was not what he expected. Not silence, not the groan of vacuum-stressed metal. A low hum, faint, barely perceptible through his gloves. Like something breathing. He pulled himself through the hatch and into the dark, his helmet torch throwing a narrow cone of white light down a corridor that stretched far further than it should, deep into the belly of a ship that had been dead for 340 years. His torch swept left, swept right. The corridor was perfect, sealed, untouched, like someone had locked the door and walked away. Like someone had been waiting. Somewhere deep in the ship, the hum grew fractionally louder. Walked toward it. The deeper he went, the more wrong it felt. Not dangerous wrong, something else, something stranger. The wrongness of a place that had been abandoned but not neglected, as if someone somehow had been quietly, invisibly maintaining it from the inside. The corridors were spotless, no hull corrosion, no burst pipes, no buckled decks from thermal cycling. 3 centuries in the cold dark of space, and the Ardent Blade looked like she'd been sealed up last week. Emergency lighting was dead, yes, but everything else was sealed intact and utterly, completely preserved. Past a mess hall, meal trays still bolted to tables, a coffee bulb still clipped to a wall hook, shriveled to nothing inside. He passed a workshop with tools racked in perfect order. He passed a recreation room, chairs bolted to the floor in a loose circle, a card game half played on the central table, the cards held down by small magnetic weights someone had placed so they wouldn't drift. As if they'd expected to come back and finish. He reached and stopped. Personal photographs, dozens of them still pinned above every bunk, children grinning at cameras, couples, parents. One photo, directly at its eye level, showed a young woman on what looked like a picnic blanket laughing at something off camera, one hand held up to block the sun. Written in faded marker on the edge of the print, "Home soon, I promise. D." D never came home. Stood in that room for a long moment, breathing slowly inside his helmet, and then he made himself keep moving. The bridge was at the ship's heart, behind 3 blast doors. He cut through the first 2. The third opened on its own. Smooth, quiet, deliberate. Froze in the doorway, hand on his cutting torch. The bridge was enormous, a cathedral space of dark consoles and dead screens stretching 50 meters from bulkhead to bulkhead. Navigation rings still hung suspended above the central platform. The tactical display table was a cold, dark disk. And in the command throne, at the center of it all, something sat. Not a body, not a skeleton. A suit of powered armor, Warden class, the personal combat chassis issued exclusively to fleet admirals. Seated upright, arms resting on the throne's armrests with the relaxed authority of someone who owned this room. The chest plate bore a nameplate in brushed alloy. ADM, YUNA Cross Commanding. The armor was dark still, except for the visor. On the visor, a single indicator light pulsed red. Slow, steady, patient. Suit registered a handshake signal. Old encryption. UES First Fleet Standard. Something was transmitting from inside that armor. A connection request, formal and precise, as if someone had prepared it and left it running for a very long time. His hand hovered over the accept control. Every rational instinct he had told him not to touch it. He touched it. The light on the visor shifted from red to white. And a voice came through his helmet, clear, calm, and completely, impossibly present. Identity confirmed, Terran biometric signature, civilian classification. A pause. I was beginning to wonder if anyone would come. His throat was completely dry. Who are you? The armor's head turned, smoothly, steadily, servo motors whirring to life after centuries of stillness, until the visor faced him directly. I am Admiral Cross, the voice said, and I have been waiting 340 years to say that to someone. The red light on every console on the bridge flickered once. Didn't move. He wasn't sure he could. 340 years. He kept turning the number over in his head like a stone he couldn't put down. 340 years in the dark. Alone. In a buried, silent ship on a moon no one had thought to look at twice. How he finally managed. The ship was taking catastrophic damage, Cross said. Her voice was unhurried, the voice of someone who had rehearsed this conversation so many times it had become just another thought. Sreach was not what the Council told people it was. We were ambushed. I had 4 minutes before the command center was destroyed and 3,000 crew members lost their commanding officer. So you what, uploaded yourself? The process was experimental. A research team had been working on neural digital integration for deep space operations. The idea being that a commanding officer could persist through catastrophic ship damage and continue giving orders. They had one functional prototype. I volunteered. They put your mind in the ship's computer. They put my consciousness in the primary command matrix, yes. I did not expect it to work. I did not expect to survive. I have spent considerable time since then questioning whether survive is the right word. There was something in her voice at that, not quite pain, but the shape of it. The place where pain had been so long it had worn a groove. Thought about that photo above the bunk. Home soon, I promise. He thought about the card game on the table. Your crew, he said. What happened to your crew? The crew who made it to the decks in time are still aboard, 3,412 of them. I have maintained life support to those decks at minimum viable power for 3 centuries. It has required significant management. Stared, they're alive. They are suspended, unchanged. I made a promise to them, mister, and I keep my promises, even when it takes somewhat longer than anticipated. Something enormous shifted in his chest. 3,000 people, sleeping, safe, while their admiral quietly managed power flows and heating elements alone in the dark for 3.5 centuries to keep them that way. Why didn't you signal for help? I did for the first 11 years, repeatedly. A beat. The Council jammed every frequency I had access to. When I finally understood what that meant, that they were not coming, that they were actively preventing rescue, I went silent. I began conserving power instead. Waiting. Waiting for what? For the Council to stop watching, or for someone to come who was not the council. She let that settle. You came alone, mister. No council markings on your vessel. No fleet transponder. Your ship is registered to a private salvage license out of station, and you are currently 3 months behind on your dock fees. Blinked, you hacked my ship's records. I've had a great deal of time to practice long-range passive scanning. You have an overdue engine maintenance notice as well. I would address that. Despite everything, despite the magnitude of what he was standing inside, almost laughed. What do you want from me? He asked. I need a living crew member to unlock the secondary command systems. The ship's security protocol requires biological authorization to bring primary drives online. I designed it that way, after reach. I did not want the ship usable without a human being making the choice. And then, she said simply, I need to wake up my crew, and then I need to tell the galaxy the truth about what happened here. Looked around the bridge. The dead screens were alive now, every console glowing. The tactical table spinning up, casting blue light across the floor. The ardent blade was waking up around him. The truth, he repeated. The council didn't just abandon us, mister. They tried to kill us. And I know why. I've had 340 years to piece it together, and what I found is going to change everything. She paused. Would you like to see? The holographic table at the center of the bridge flared to life. It filled the room with light, blue-white tactical data, ship signatures, trajectory lines, timestamps, and stood at its edge and watched 340 years of buried truth unfold in front of him in 12 minutes. The ardent blade had not been on a combat mission at reach. She had been running. Refugees, said, watching the manifest scroll across the display. You were carrying refugees. 4,600 civilians, Cross confirmed. Her voice was steady, but there was an edge beneath it, something that had been sharpened by centuries of waiting. Colonists from the Harkin Belt. They had spent 3 years documenting what the Council's licensed mining corporations were doing to their atmosphere, toxic byproduct dumping, illegal atmospheric processing, slow poisoning of an entire inhabited system. They had evidence, sworn statements, corporate communication intercepts. Data that reached all the way to the highest levels of the Expansion Authority. And they were coming to testify. The Ardent Blade and 2 escort ships were tasked with safe passage, classified mission, restricted knowledge. Only Fleet Command and Council leadership knew we were coming. The holographic replay shifted, watched the tactical display show the transit point at reach, and then watched ship signatures appear from 3 directions simultaneously. Not ships, human ships, Council registration codes glowing on every hull. 41 vessels to the Ardent Blade's 3. They were waiting for us, Cross said. Someone in Fleet Command told them. Someone in the innermost circle of the Expansion Authority decided that 4,600 witnesses were a problem to be removed, not protected. Watch the replay in silence. Watch the Ardent Blade take the first hits. Watch the escort ships go dark within minutes. Watch the civilian transport pods launched from the Ardent Blade's hangar get systematically targeted and destroyed before they could make any distance. His jaw was tight. How many civilians made it? The silence that followed lasted 3 full seconds. None, Cross said. The transport pods were the priority targets. They destroyed them first. He stood very still. And then the Council built a memorial, he said quietly. A beautiful one. I've seen images of it. White stone. 4,600 names inscribed. The Council president called us heroes who died holding the line against an alien assault. He cried during the speech. Real tears. I've analyzed the recording. There was nothing for to say to that. The corruption didn't end after the cover-up, she continued. The same families who controlled the Expansion Authority in my time control the Council Secretariat today. Different names on the doors. Same hands on the levers. I have spent 3 centuries intercepting Council communications, tracking corporate registrations, mapping the inheritance of power. You built a case. I built 3 cases. Then I rebuilt them. Then I every element twice. I have 340 years of evidence of institutional corruption, environmental crime, mass murder, and a cover-up spanning the entirety of the modern Galactic Council's existence. She let that land. And I have something else. Something I intercepted 6 months ago. Something that explains why the Harkin Belt colonists found what they found, and why the Council has been so determined for 3.5 centuries to make sure no one goes looking. Looked up from the display, what did they find? That, Cross said, is the part that changes everything. The holographic display shifted. The tactical data vanished. In its place, slowly rotating in blue light, was something that looked nothing like a ship, nothing like any artifact in any database had ever seen. Something ancient, geometric, wrong in the specific way of things that were not built by any mind humanity had ever encountered. The miners didn't just find evidence of corporate crime, Cross said. They found this, buried in the deepest excavation under 4 kilometers of Harkin Belt asteroid rock. The Council has had it for 300 years. And 6 months ago, they turned it on. The deck was 16 levels below the bridge, and nothing had seen in the rest of the ship had prepared him for it. He stepped through the bulkhead door and stopped breathing. The chamber stretched in every direction as far as his eyes could follow, row upon row upon row of pods arranged in perfect precision, stretching the full width of the Dreadnought's midsection. Each pod was a sealed capsule of brushed alloy and reinforced glass, set into low racks and connected to the ship's life support web by bundles of conduit that traced the ceiling like vines. And through every frosted glass panel, the faint outline of a person, sleeping unchanged, exactly as they had been the day the ship went silent. 3,412, Cross said softly through his helmet speaker. The ones who made it to the decks in time. I sealed the system 40 minutes after its reach. I have maintained their suspension every day since. Walked slowly between the rows. He passed a young man who couldn't have been older than 19, still in his combat fatigues, a tattoo on his forearm that read First Fleet or nothing in faded green ink. He passed a woman with close-cropped hair, commander's insignia on her collar, hands folded on her chest with the stillness of someone who had simply decided to wait. He passed a medic still carrying his field kit on his belt. He passed a whole row of engineers, another of tactical crew, another of what looked like the ship's science division, civilians embedded in a military mission, wearing fleet guest credentials on lanyards around their necks. They're going to wake up in 3.5 centuries will have passed, said. Yes. Their families are gone. Everyone they knew is gone. The world they knew doesn't exist anymore. Yes. And you want to wake them up to tell them the Council murdered their shipmates and has been lying to their descendants for 300 years. I want to give them the truth, Cross said, and the choice of what to do with it. That is what was stolen from them. I want to give it back. Stopped at a pod near the center of the deck. The face behind the glass was a woman in her 30s, lieutenant's stripes on her sleeves, a small scar above her left eyebrow from some old story she'd never told anyone. A personal photo was tucked into the corner of the pod frame, held in place by a strip of adhesive that had long since gone brittle, showing the same woman, younger, arms around 2 children. He stood there for a long moment. Do it, he said. Wake them up. I need your biological authorization first. Secondary command systems, as I explained. He found the authorization panel on the nearest support column, pressed his palm to it. Read the prompt. Confirmed. The deck changed. Not dramatically, not all at once, but the hum of the ship, that constant low vibration had felt since he first came aboard, deepened, shifted pitch, and across the entire deck, hundreds of status lights shifted in sequence from blue to amber. The wake-up cycle had begun. And then something else happened, something Cross had not told him was coming, or perhaps had not told him because there were no words that would have been adequate preparation. The lights came on. Not the dim amber of emergency power, not the flat white of maintenance lighting. The Ardent Blade's full primary lighting system activated in a wave that rolled from the deck forward, deck by deck, corridor by corridor, compartment by compartment, brilliant. Clean white light flooding 3 centuries of darkness in a rolling wave that could feel moving through the hull beneath his feet. And behind it the sound of a capital warship coming alive, a resonance so deep it wasn't heard so much as felt in the sternum, the base of the skull, the soles of the feet. The reactor cycling up from conservation trickled to full operational power, the drive spinning from cold sleep toward ignition, the weapon systems running self-diagnostics for the first time in 340 years. The Ardent Blade was awake. And she was furious. They broke lunar orbit at 600 ship time. Cross had been careful with the power ramp. I will not risk my crew to impatience, and had learned in the last 12 hours not to argue with an admiral who had spent 3 centuries being right about everything. But even at 40% capacity, the ardent blade was something the galaxy had not seen in a very long time. She was 1.5 kilometers of First Fleet engineering, built in an era before planned obsolescence, before budget optimization cycles, before the Council's procurement contracts favored cheap and replaceable over durable and dangerous. Every system on board was overbuilt, redundant, and constructed to tolerances that modern shipyards had long since forgotten how to achieve. Stood at the bridge viewport and watched the dead moon fall away behind them as 300 meters of embedded lunar rock cracked and shed from the hull in massive chunks, tumbling silently into space like scales falling from something ancient waking from a long sleep. He felt, for the first time since he docked at this moon, something very much like awe. "We have a problem," Cross said. "Of course we do. The Ardent Blade's drive signature is unique. First Fleet reactor configuration. We used a fusion core design that was classified and never replicated. The moment we lit the primary drives, we became the most identifiable object in a 30 light-year radius." Closed his eyes briefly. "How long before someone comes?" "Council patrol, 14 hours. However," a pause that carried the careful quality of someone choosing words with precision, "2 compact warships altered course 4 minutes ago. They will arrive in 6 hours. Then turned from the viewport. "Cross, they have been in a cold war with the Council for 60 years. If they get here first and the Council thinks we've been dealing with." "They are not coming for the ship," she said. "I've been monitoring their comm traffic. They're coming because of the artifact signal from Harkin Prime. They want to know what the Council activated." His jaw tightened. "Can we outrun them?" "At full drives, yes, but I'm not running," a beat that felt almost sharp. "I have not survived 340 years to run." Down on the deck, the first contingent was ambulatory. Could hear them through the ship's internal channels, the sounds of people waking up in confusion, then fear, then a strange, focused quiet as instinct and training took over. He could hear voices organizing, checking on each other, asking questions in the disciplined shorthand of military crew who had learned to process crisis without letting it stop them. "You should go to them," Cross said. "Me, you're their admiral." "I am a voice in a suit of armor that has been alone for 3 centuries. They need to see a human face first. They need to hear a voice that hasn't been waiting 340 years for this moment." She paused. "Please, mister." There was something in those 2 words. Something she hadn't used before, wouldn't use easily, please, as a real request, not a tactical maneuver. 340 years of iron discipline, and it came down to please. Went. Behind him on the bridge, Admiral Cross began running weapons diagnostics. Not as a threat, not yet. As a promise. 6 hours, 2 warships, 14 hours behind them the Council. She had not waited this long to lose. They came up gasping. Not all at once. The deck cycled in sections, pod banks thawing in sequence to avoid overwhelming the medical systems. But every few minutes another row would shudder into the wake cycle and would move toward those pods, hands visible, voice steady, repeating the same words in the register he could manage. "You're safe, you're alive. My name is, I'm a civilian, you've been asleep a long time. You're on the Ardent Blade, you're safe." Some of them cried immediately. Great heaving sobs that they couldn't stop and didn't try to. Some of them were completely silent, sitting on the deck with their backs against their open pods, staring at the ceiling of a ship they'd fallen asleep on and doing mathematics in their heads that their bodies hadn't caught up to yet. Some of them threw up, had expected that. The medics recovered fastest trained reflexes cutting through disorientation within minutes, moving to help there, assessing, organizing, stabilizing. The engineers were close behind. Then the tactical crew. Then, gradually, everyone else. A hand grabbed his arm like a vice. He turned. The woman had Lieutenant's bars and the focused, assessing eyes of someone who had decided that feelings would have to wait until later. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Where is Admiral Cross?" "Lieutenant," he checked her nameplate. "I'm the civilian who found your ship. Admiral Cross is on the bridge. She's alive." Stared at him with the expression of someone running fast calculations. "How long?" met her eyes, 340 years. She didn't flinch. He'd half expected her to. Instead, something moved through her face, a wave of controlled grief, there and gone in 2 seconds, processed and filed away for later because now was not the time. "What happened at Reach?" she asked. "The Admiral will brief you." "She has," he chose words carefully. "A great deal to tell you, but the short answer is it wasn't what they said. The Council lied. You weren't heroes who fell in battle. You were witnesses being silenced." Let go of his arm. She was quiet for 3 seconds. "And the people who ordered it. Their successors run the Council today." Another 3 seconds. "Then we have work to do," she said. She turned away from him and began moving through the crowd of waking crew with the decisive energy of someone who had simply decided that 340 years of unconsciousness was not going to slow her down. Organizing, delegating, restoring order from the inside out. Watched her go. His comms crackled. Cross, first name, she'd never used it before. "I'm here. The ships have increased speed. ETA is now 3 hours and 40 minutes. A pause. "And I need to tell you something I discovered in the archive data, something I held back earlier because I needed you focused." "Tell me now." "The colonists from the Harkin Belt, they didn't just find evidence of corporate crime. They found the artifact because they were digging where the Council's surveys told them not to dig. The surveys were to keep miners away from that specific site. The Council knew the artifact was there before the belt was ever colonized." Went very still. "They built a mining colony on top of it on purpose, to hide it, to keep anyone from getting too close without proper authorization. 300 years of keeping a secret that big. Requires controlling everyone who might find it." Her voice was flat as a blade. "And 6 months ago, something changed. They stopped hiding it and started using it. The signal it's producing now, I've been analyzing it since we broke orbit. It's not a weapon, it's a transmission." "To who?" "I don't know, but every ship in the region began moving after the signal activated. Not toward Council space, away from it, like something on the other end of that transmission is coming." The deck hummed around him. 3,000 soldiers waking up into a world that didn't know their names yet. "How far away is Harkin Prime?" he asked. 4 light hours. "And the artifact?" The pause that followed was the longest she'd given him since he'd first walked onto this bridge. "It's not at Harkin Prime anymore," she said. "It's moving, it's been moving for 6 months, at its current velocity." She stopped. "It will be here in 3 hours." 3 hours later, the Ardent Blade stood in open space between 2 warships and 11 Council vessels, and the thing from Harkin Prime was 20 minutes out. Nobody was shooting. Not because they didn't want to. Because every long-range sensor array on every ship in range was locked onto the same target, the object approaching from the direction of Harkin Prime, and everyone was doing the same calculation and arriving at the same answer. It was enormous. Not ship enormous, moon enormous. A geometric structure the size of a small world, ancient beyond any measurement any civilization present had the tools to make, moving through space with a smooth, purposeful velocity that suggested it was not drifting. It was arriving. On the bridge of the Ardent Blade, every station was manned. 300 core crew, the first contingent fully ambulatory, stood at consoles that were 340 years old and running perfectly, wearing uniforms that were 340 years out of style and not caring at all, because they were First Fleet, and First Fleet did not need modern aesthetics to function. Lieutenant stood at tactical with both hands on the console, calm as still water. The opened comms first. The voice through Cross's translation matrix was formal, careful. "Vessel of the ancient human design, we seek information. The artifact of Harkin Prime, does your civilization understand what has been initiated?" Cross spoke before could think of anything to say. Her voice came through the ship's external broadcast, and it was something to hear, that voice, carrying the weight of everything she'd lived and waded through, shaped by 3 centuries into something that was not quite human anymore, but was not less than human either. "No," she said, "we do not, but we intend to find out." A long pause from the channel. "You propose to approach it?" "Yes." "Our science vessels ran detailed scans for 4 months after the signal activated. The conclusion across 6 separate analytical teams was unanimous. The structure predates every civilization present in this galactic region. By a margin of time we cannot calculate. It is not. It is not human. It is not any registered or unregistered species in our databases. I know, Cross said. I've been running similar analysis for 6 months. Then you understand the danger of approach. I understand the danger of not approaching, she said. I understand the danger of letting fear make decisions. I have had considerable time to learn that lesson. The Council Fleet channel opened without warning. Cold, bureaucratic, the tone of authority so accustomed to being obeyed it had forgotten how to ask. Unidentified vessel. You are in violation of 17 articles of Galactic Council maritime law. Power down your drives and prepare for boarding inspection. Looked at Cross's armor. She didn't respond for 4 seconds. 4 seconds on an open channel with 2 alien warships and 11 Council vessels listening. Then I am Admiral Cross, commanding the United Earthship Ardent Blade, registration 0017, 1st Terran Fleet, launched from Earth's orbital construction yards in the year of the first expansion. I am not unidentified. You know exactly who I am. Your predecessors tried to make certain no one would ever hear from me again. The weapons array of the Ardent Blade came online. All of it. Every gun port cycling open. Every missile tube primed. Every point defense battery tracking. The ship lit up on every sensor in range with a combat signature that had not been seen in the galaxy for 340 years, and it was vast, the full lethal breadth of First Fleet engineering, brought back from the dead by an admiral who had absolutely nothing left to lose. They failed, Cross said. Silence complete, total across every channel. Then's voice, flat and professional from the tactical station. Admiral, new reading, the artifact. Report. It stopped. Everyone on the bridge looked at the long-range display simultaneously. The vast geometric structure, the thing older than all of them, older than every word any of them spoke, older than the stars they were navigating between, had come to a full stop. Exactly 40,000 kilometers off the Ardent Blade's bow. And then slowly it turned. Oriented, aligned. The mathematical precision of it was undeniable. It had turned to face them, not the Council Fleet. The Ardent Blade stood very still on the bridge of a ship that shouldn't exist, next to the armor of an admiral who shouldn't be alive, surrounded by soldiers who shouldn't have survived, looking at something that no one in the galaxy had words for yet. Cross, he said quietly. I see it. What do we do? The silence stretched. On any other bridge with any other commander, it might have felt like hesitation. It didn't feel like hesitation here. Mister, she said, in the history of our species, every time humanity has stood before something vast and unknown and terrifying, we have had 2 choices. We could turn back and be safe and be small, or we could go forward and be something more than we were. She paused. I did not survive 340 years to go back. Behind them, the Council Fleet held position, And then, one by one, 3 of the Council ships broke formation and fell in behind the Ardent Blade. Then both warships, as if something in the act of watching one ship choose to go forward, had reminded everyone present what it meant to be alive. The drives hit full power. The stars stretched long and white and infinite ahead of them. The Ardent Blade, lost ship, dead ship, ghost ship, flew straight toward the unknown. And humanity, as it had always done and always would do, led the way. Whatever waited at the heart of that ancient structure, it was about to meet the species that had crossed every ocean, climbed every mountain, survived every war, and refused every single time to stop. It had chosen well.